From Hong Kong to London, a flight distance of 9,600 kilometers. For most people, it's nothing more than a plane ticket, 12 hours, a movie, and an in-flight meal. But for Li Ka-shing, these 9,600 kilometers represent a distance he measured out over 70 years. In 1940, he fled from Chaozhou, Guangdong, to Hong Kong with nothing but a single thin shirt on his back. In 2015, he transferred 400 billion in assets from Hong Kong to London, leaving behind a storm of condemnation. 2 migrations, 2 different escapes. The first time, he was a refugee driven by the times, with no control over his fate. The second time, he was the richest man who chose to leave of his own accord, condemned by all. But has anyone ever thought about this? What must a person go through to uproot a lifetime's work from their homeland at the age of 90 and transplanted to a strange land thousands of miles away? He could have done nothing at all. He was already Asia's richest person. He had sat in that position for a full 16 years. He controlled 1/7 of Hong Kong's housing, half of its ports, and 70% of its supermarkets. From birth to death, the people of Hong Kong live within his business empire, using his phone service, shopping at his malls, living in his properties. Even after death, they still use his funeral services. Some people call this city Li's City. This is not meant as a compliment. Once upon a time, he was the totem of the Lion Rock spirit, the banner of Chinese capital's triumph over British capital. He was living proof that made every young person from humble beginnings believe hard work leads to success. But somewhere along the way, the winds shifted. Dock workers held up banners that read, "He raises you, but you can't raise a family." Elementary school students used subtle irony in their essays to mock Brother Cheung's greatness. A think tank under Xinhua News Agency published an article questioning, "Don't let Li Ka-shing run away." What exactly did he do wrong? Or perhaps he did nothing wrong at all? What's wrong is this era, and those who once elevated him to a pedestal, only to now push him into the abyss? The answer to this question lies hidden in every choice made over the past 40 years. Welcome to the Soft Crash. I'm Fanko. Today, we're going to explore the second half of Li Ka-shing's life together. I strongly recommend those who haven't watched his first half story to finish that before coming here to ensure a seamless connection. In June 1971, Li Ka-shing founded Cheung Real Estate Limited. A year later, it was renamed Cheung Holdings Limited, and 3 months after that, it went public. Now, there's an important backdrop to all this that we need to explain first. Starting in 1958, Li Ka-shing acquired land and built properties under the guise of constructing factory buildings. Now, it's the 1970s, and after more than a decade, he's only just starting to establish a dedicated real estate company and take it public to expand and strengthen the business. Why wait so long? Because during those 10+ years, Hong Kong's real estate industry went through a complete reshuffling. In the 1950s and 60s, the vast majority of Hong Kong's property developers were small to medium-sized companies. In the beginning, when people first started building, they were all putting up small buildings one at a time, kind of like village houses, where you could build one structure on a small plot of land. Later on, gradually they stopped selling by buildings and started selling by floors. Then, further down the line, slightly larger slab buildings could be divided and sold by units. It all evolved step by step. But by the 1970s, small plots of land were becoming increasingly scarce, and the government was approving land in larger and larger blocks to property developers. If you wanted to acquire that land, you had to have sufficient capital. Land prices kept rising, buildings grew taller and taller, projects became larger and larger, and construction costs kept climbing. Small companies found it very difficult to survive and develop in this environment. So, what could they do? Go public? Speaking of going public, there's some background that needs to be explained. Hong Kong's first stock exchange was called the Hong Kong Stockbrokers Association, established in 1891, dating back to the 19th century. In 1914, it was renamed the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Later on, in 1921, Hong Kong finally got its second stock exchange, called the Hong Kong Stockbrokers Association. By 1947, these two merged to form the Hong Kong Stock Exchange Limited. Up to this point, everything was controlled by British capital. Remember earlier when we talked about Stanley Ho in that episode? We mentioned how his father and a few uncles went to speculate in stocks and got completely wiped out? That's because of this characteristic of the Hong Kong stock market the British capital called the shots. They could stir up storms, they were the house, and everyone else was just retail investors. So after Chinese capital gradually developed, they felt this couldn't continue. They had to change the situation. So in 1969, the Far East Exchange was established, which some people directly called the Far East Club. This was the first stock exchange founded by Chinese businessmen. From this point on, the British monopoly over Hong Kong's securities market finally began to crumble. 2 years later, the Kam Nhan Stock Exchange and the Kowloon Stock Exchange were established one after another. Once these two exchanges emerged, the listing channels for Chinese merchant enterprises suddenly burst wide open. Before, others controlled the gates, but now if you wanted to go public, you could just go directly to these three new exchanges. The stock market is like people carrying sedan chairs for each other. It's all about mutual support. When more people trade stocks and more money flows in, that creates the foundation for a rally. By the end of 1971, the Hong Kong stock market closed at 341.36 points. By March 1973, it surged to a peak of 1,774.96 points, from just over 300 to more than 1,700, absolutely skyrocketing. In this kind of atmosphere, just take a look at those real estate companies. Don't they all need money? Not a single one missed out. They all started rushing into the stock market one after another. In 1972 alone, over 65 real estate companies went public. Most of the big names in Hong Kong's real estate industry today made their debut in the capital markets that very year in '72. It was a pivotal moment in time. Having covered that background, let's look back at Cheung Holdings, which went public in exactly 1972. How hot was the IPO? The IPO was oversubscribed 65.4 times. Everyone wanted in. Everyone had to enter a lottery. On the first day of trading, the stock price doubled, jumping from the offering price of $3 to over $6. In the first year after going public, Cheung land reserves more than doubled, roughly tripling from the original amount. In just 1 year, they made a profit of $43.7 million. Initially, their own plan was that earning over $10 million in the first year would already be pretty good, but they ended up making over $40 million, way better than they ever imagined. Compare that to making plastic flowers or plastic toys before. This was incomparably faster. The profits from all those previous years combined were only around $10 million. Li Ka-shing looked at this and thought, wow, this is great. This is so much more comfortable than running a real business. Capital really is king. The following year, they did another massive share offering, 5 times in total when you add them all up. After each offering, they took the money and went on a buying spree, acquiring land and putting up buildings. By 1975, his rental income had already begun to surpass his manufacturing earnings. At this point, Cheung had only been listed for about 3 or 4 years. But he had been in manufacturing for 20 years already, from 1955 to 1975. Don't think for a second that he was some impulsive person though. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Li Ka-shing was actually very careful and cautious in his actions, never simply following the crowd. Before making a decision, he always listens to opinions from all sides, then carefully weighs them against current circumstances before forming his judgment. But once he's made a decision, there's no more hesitation. He acts with thunderous force and unwavering determination. He has a personal motto: stay steady while pursuing growth, and stay grounded while expanding. It's hard to imagine this coming from a real estate company boss, right? But that's exactly the path he took. Speaking of which, let's talk about how he built up his strength step by step after going public and before fighting that earth-shattering battle. Before he set his sights on Central, the properties developed by Cheung were basically all in remote suburbs and rather desolate, out-of-the-way corners. To put it in a phrase surrounding the city from the countryside, the startup phase was relatively steady, with low risk and low cost. Besides acquiring land himself, he had another very clever model, partnering with listed companies that had land but no money for joint development. For example, Nanhai Textile Mill, Nanyang Textile Mill, Qianan Industrial, Guangsheng Hung, Trust Properties, Federal Real Estate, and so on. These were all his collaborative partners. If you don't have the capability or energy to do this, I'll help you develop it, and we'll all make money together. This model had huge advantages for Cheung. They didn't need to spend their own money to acquire land, only paying a small amount for foundation work, and then they could sell off-plan properties. Pre-sales means selling properties before completion, using those pre-sale funds to finance the subsequent construction. And he was extremely cautious every step of the way to reach this point. Although Mr. Fok Ying Tong had invented the pre-sale system as early as the 1950s, Li Ka-shing actually didn't really follow this model for quite a long time. He mainly focused on rental properties. It wasn't until this model had been stable for many years that he finally entered it, staying prudent while pursuing growth and maintaining stability while developing. Back then, he really did take it step by step like that. But by 1977, he felt it was time to make a move upward. If he didn't make a move now, this might be as good as it gets for the rest of his life. So, how to make that move? You have to fight the tough battles. Do something you've never done in your entire life. Something that stuns everyone. That's the only way to make a name for yourself. Only then can you raise that steel pole up high. If you don't raise it, what are you gonna use to stand out from the crowd? And that opportunity came this very year. The development rights for 2 properties above subway stations were about to go up for auction, looking for partners to work with the metro company. And guess what? Talk about a stroke of luck, it just happened to be Central Station and Admiralty Station. These were absolutely 2 prime pieces of property. Hong Kong's Central and Admiralty, that's some of the most valuable real estate in the entire world. Absolutely worth its weight in gold. If you're not a complete fool, whatever you do in this prime location, you're basically sitting there counting money. Let's talk about this subway project first. This was the most massive public works project since Hong Kong's founding. Where did the funding come from? 3 sources. First, bank loans, guaranteed by the British Hong Kong government. Second, the subway company raised funds by selling stocks on the securities market. Third, the metro company partners with real estate developers to jointly develop properties above the stations and the profits earned from that. This third part is where the opportunity lies for real estate companies. This is a foot traffic business. With so many people passing through the subway station every day, the property above naturally becomes valuable. Property developers all across Hong Kong were salivating over it. Everyone wanted a piece of the pie. In total, no fewer than 30 consortiums and real estate companies came forward to bid. Land naturally was among them, and aside from land, there was also a whole group of Chinese-owned property companies. At that time, There were plenty of companies much more powerful than Cheung. Cheung couldn't even rank among them. Most companies had a might as well give it a shot mentality. What if I get lucky? Kind of like buying a lottery ticket. Didn't cost them much anyway. But Li Ka-shing's thinking was different from the very beginning. Right from the start, his goal was that he had to win it. Why did he dare to think this way? Because he had figured out two things. The first thing was about land. Didn't land belong to Jardine Matheson? The chairman of Jardine Matheson was named David Newbigging. This man had started working at Jardines when he was 20 years old, fighting his way up from within step by step until he became chairman of the board of directors. He was at the peak of what a professional manager could achieve. But the situation at Land was quite different. The founding family of Land was actually still Jardine's largest shareholder. So on one hand, Newbigging was the chairman of the board, but on the other hand, he was still constrained by the shareholder bosses. After all, he was an employee. More importantly, Newbigging was based in Hong Kong, but the major shareholders didn't think much of the Hong Kong operations and always wanted to shift the development focus overseas. Internally, they weren't a unified front. Once disagreements arose over decisions on the Hong Kong side, they might not necessarily choose to fight to the bitter end. This was the first thing Li Ka-shing noticed. The second thing concerned the metro company. Li Ka-shing mobilized all his connections and means, made inquiries all around, and actually managed to dig up some leads. The Hong Kong MTR Corporation itself reports directly to the British Hong Kong government, but it doesn't completely rely on government funding. The government only gave it a limited number of privileges and benefits for fundraising, design and construction, and company operations. Everything had to follow business principles and market rules. When it came to acquiring land, whatever the market price was, the metro company had to pay out in hard cash. He uncovered a crucial piece of information. The subway company had once negotiated with the government, hoping to pay for the land parcels using a combination of partial cash and partial subway company stock. But the government said no, you must pay in full. No negotiation. The two sides went back and forth on this issue, arguing for quite some time. Li Ka-shing drew a conclusion from this. The subway company was short on cash and couldn't come up with the full payment. Well, that presented an opportunity. You need money? Fine, I'll provide it. I have money. So, in his bid proposal, he wrote clear as day. For this entire project, the metro company wouldn't need to fork out a single cent. All payments for acquiring the land I'll cover in full cash, and all subsequent construction costs and everything else I'll handle completely. Not only that, he also made a clever move when it came to profit distribution. Generally speaking, for this type of joint venture, splitting it 50-50 between both parties is the industry standard. But Li Ka-shing said you take the lion's share, 51% goes to you. What did this mean? It means he put himself in a position where I do the work, you take the profits. You call the shots on the entire project, and whenever there's something that needs doing, you wave the baton and I'll charge into battle. Not only does it free you from any financial worries, it completely maxes out the whole experience for you. Could land development really be that humble and accommodating? Impossible. They'd always been arrogant and haughty, looking down on everyone with contempt. They look down on Chinese capital and certainly won't take their partners' concerns seriously. Whenever interests don't align, Jardine's not about to accommodate the other side. How did things work before? I showed up, I bid, I won. That was the daily routine. That was the inertia. If I don't win, who else would? Why would I need to make concessions to you? Why bother with all that effort? This is the mentality of arrogance, and arrogance increases the probability of failure. What about the other Chinese-funded companies? They didn't have the guts to take on such a huge risk. This wasn't just talk, Basically, the Metro Company had no risk on their side, which meant all the risk was entirely on Cheung shoulders. Li Ka-shing was really putting all his eggs in one basket with this project. He poured every dollar that Cheung could mobilize at the time into it. If this didn't work out, it would have all been for nothing. From signing the contract to construction, for an entire year. Just how much pressure was Li Ka-shing under? Later, he himself said it was heaven's blessing, truly a huge gamble. And the result? When the bidding results were announced, Cheung Holdings won. The world was in an uproar. The Hong Kong media ran a report at the time saying, "This is a milestone in Cheung Holdings' development history, a glorious triumph for Chinese capital in real estate." And what about Jardine Land? They lost a crucial stronghold through carelessness. The lower ranks seethed with indignation. Middle management was utterly baffled. Senior leadership flew into a rage of humiliation. And then, to top it all off, internal strife erupted. Word has it that New Beginning's eventual departure was at least partly connected to this whole affair. In May 1978, the development above Central Station, called Worldwide Plaza, went on sale, perfectly timed with a boom in Hong Kong's real estate market. After the advertisements appeared in the newspapers, everything sold out within 8 hours, with total transactions reaching 592 million Hong Kong dollars, setting a new record for property prices in Hong Kong. 3 months later, in August 1978, the property above Admiralty Station, called Hoi Fu Center, launched with a total value of 9,800 million, even higher than the one in Central, setting a record for the best single-day sales on opening day. The two projects combined totaled approximately 1.6 billion. How much did Cheung make? Gross profit over 700 million, net profit close to 70 million Hong Kong dollars. The profit margin wasn't actually high. It was significantly lower than the Hong Kong real estate industry average at the time. But Li Ka-shing was never after this money. What he wanted was status in the arena. After this battle, that steel pipe was truly standing upright. Years later, when Li Ka-shing looked back on this battle, his assessment was, that was heaven's blessing. He was right. Luck truly matters. But luck is always built on a foundation of strength. If he hadn't been thorough in his thinking beforehand, decisive in his decisions, swift in his actions, and bold in his approach, luck would never have found him in the first place. He also said something else. What I'm most proud of isn't defeating land, but rather that I have many partners who still maintain relationships with me after our collaborations. Take the MTR Corporation deal, for instance, because he prioritized the other party's interests and made sure everyone profited from working with him. That's why his path just kept getting wider and wider. But the story doesn't end there. What came next was an even bigger battle to fight. After securing the subway project from the late 1970s to the mid-1980s, Cheung Holdings entered a period of rapid expansion. During this period, they continued to use that same model to make money, partnering with listed companies that had land but no capital to develop properties, and even acquiring companies outright. What kind of companies did he want to buy? He has his own criteria. Companies with substantial land reserves, but because of their long-term conservative management approach, their stock prices have been steadily declining. The major shareholders' control over the company becomes unstable. So, for companies like this, I won't partner with you anymore. I'll just buy you out directly. Wouldn't that be even better? For example, in 1977, he used 230 million Hong Kong dollars to execute a lightning acquisition of the American company Young Kong. What did Young Kong have in its hands? The Hilton Hotel in Central, the largest Hilton outside of North America, plus the Hyatt Hotel in Bali, Indonesia. Many people thought he overpaid, but What did Li Ka-shing see in this? He felt that if you were to build a hotel of the same scale from scratch in the same location, even if you paid double the amount, it couldn't be done. At least you couldn't find such an ideal location. And Bali later became Indonesia's most prestigious tourist destination. So the bet paid off. There's also a rumor going around about this deal. It's said that Li Ka-shing overheard two people chatting in an elevator, saying that the Hilton in Central was up for sale. He immediately had his people go find out who to approach for the purchase. When they reached out, the other party said, "We only made this decision 2 hours ago. Where did you hear about it?" For a deal this massive, you'd definitely think it through carefully, especially given his personality. But he likely had already formed his own judgment about this matter long ago, so the moment he heard the news, he made his decision instantly and executed the deal with lightning speed. And the appreciation this acquisition later brought doubled the entire net asset value of Cheung at that time. For example, in 1978, he acquired a 25% stake in the British-owned listed company Green Island Cement, and later gradually increased his holdings to over 40%. He gained controlling interest. Qingzhou Yingni, also known as Qingzhou Cement Factory, primarily engaged in the production and sale of cement and other construction materials. This was China's very first cement factory, established back in the 12th year of Emperor Guangxu's reign during the Qing dynasty, that's 1886. By 1889, British merchants bought shares and took it over. When Li Ka-shing acquired it, on one hand, he could use it for his own construction projects. This was upstream in the industrial chain. But more importantly, Qingchao Cement had a massive factory site on Hong Hom Hoek Yuen Street in Kowloon. For him, this was essentially acquiring land at a bargain price. 2 birds with 1 stone. Buy a company that has value in itself, but the land it holds is even more valuable. After wrapping up these 2 deals, now comes the real main event, Wharf. What exactly was Wharf's background? That was another arm of Jardine Matheson, paired with Hong Kong Land as Jardine's twin wings. Newbigging, Jardine's senior managing director, also served concurrently as chairman of Wharf's board of directors. The Wharf's operations covered most of the docks and warehouses across Kowloon, Tsim Shat Tsui, the New Territories, and Hong Kong Island, along with hotel buildings, trams, Star Ferry, and many other properties. Some of the land they held was in areas where every inch was worth its weight in gold. The most prosperous prime locations in Kowloon, like Tsim Shat Tsui. Even if you're not familiar with the various place names in Hong Kong, you've probably at least heard of Tsim Shat Tsui from Hong Kong movies, right? It's basically the equivalent of the Bund in Shanghai. But at that time, Wharf was running its operations rather poorly, which was somewhat of a waste of such valuable assets. At the time, financial analysts had offered their assessment, saying that if Wharf could fully leverage these land resources of theirs, achieving a 20% compound annual growth rate over the next decade would be a breeze. Additionally, this analyst also estimated Wharf's stock price at that time, $13.50 per share, absolutely undervalued. Li Ka-shing had done his own calculations, and the actual value of Wharf's stock was absolutely no less than $50. 13.5 versus $50. Wasn't this just picking up cigarette butts? Just like Buffett, who's really going to share their money-making secrets with you? The commentators analyze all day long, but they don't have the money to buy in. So he kept a low profile, quietly using scattered accounts to gradually acquire Wharf shares, buying from over $10 per share all the way up to over $30 per share. In the end, he acquired 20 million shares, holding nearly 20% of the company. At that point, Jardine itself only had about that much left in Wharf holdings. Why so little? As we mentioned before, some of these British companies were poorly managed on one hand, and on the other hand, they had no desire to continue fighting it out in Hong Kong. So on one hand, they kept issuing new shares to grab more cash, constantly diluting their stake. On the other hand, they were transferring assets, and their holdings in Wharf gradually dwindled. But there's a saying that goes, what you can't have always stirs your heart, while those who are favored act without fear. You can choose not to want it yourself, but you can't let someone else snatch it away. You've already acquired 20%. No matter how secretive you try to be, it's obvious to everyone. When Jardine saw this, they thought, so, it's you again, Li Ka-shing, coming after us. You're really set on going head-to-head with me. Well, I'll show you what happens when you pick a fight with the wrong person. If I don't beat you black and blue, you'll never understand why the flowers are so red. So Jardine started buying back shares too. But they didn't have that much cash on hand, couldn't get the capital flowing quickly enough in the short term, and it looked like they might not be able to outmaneuver Li Ka-shing. What to do? They turned to HSBC for help, but they weren't asking HSBC for a loan. They wanted HSBC to step in and put some pressure on Li Ka-shing to make him stop being so obstinate. HSBC did step in and had a chat with Li Ka-shing. But by this time, Cheung's relationship with HSBC was actually already quite good. After securing the MTR project, HSBC took notice of him and proactively approached him to collaborate on a project, the redevelopment of the Hong Kong Chinese Bank building. It had just been completed and put into operation 3 months before this whole Wharf situation. They were in their honeymoon period, so HSBC's word carried weight. Li Ka-shing, on one hand, didn't want to offend this financial backer, and on the other hand, he didn't want to offend another person either, Pao Yue-kong. Who was Pao Yue-kong? At that time, the #1 figure among Hong Kong capital, the undisputed shipping magnate, and he also served as a director at HSBC Bank, making him the first Chinese person to break into HSBC's inner circle, their earliest Chinese director. At that time, he was arguably the most powerful person around, and YK Pao also had his eye on Wharf. HSBC came to Li Ka-shing saying, you need to stop accumulating shares, and Bao Yugang also wanted Wharf. He didn't want to offend either side. So in July 1978, in a quiet tea house in Central, Li Ka-shing and YK Pao had a brief but highly efficient negotiation. Both sides got what they needed, exchanging their interests. Li Ka-shing sold his Wharf Holdings shares to YK Pao. First sold 10 million shares, reluctantly pocketing a clean profit of 60 million. Then Pao Yue-kong stood as guarantor, enabling Li Ka-shing to later acquire 90 million shares of Hutchison Whampoa from HSBC. We'll get to that in a moment. Now, about Hutchison Whampoa, let's finish the Wharf story first. With the portion Li Ka-shing had given him, plus what Pao Yue-kong had already accumulated earlier, Boss Pao now held 30% of Wharf. Surpassing Jardine, he strode confidently into a seat on the Wharf's board of directors. But the story doesn't end there. Bao Yugang joined the board of directors, and not even 2 years later, in mid-June 1980, trouble struck. It was Newbigging again. While Bao Yugang was away in Europe for a meeting, Newbigging suddenly launched an attack and started buying up Wharf shares. And what method did he use? He used Landstock, which was trading at $100 per share at the time, to swap with retail investors for Wharf shares. Wharf was only $77 a share back then. He wanted a desperate counterattack, instantly increasing his holdings to kick Pao Yue-kong out of Wharf in one swift move. If successful, Boss Pao really wouldn't be able to stay there. But Bao Yugang reacted incredibly fast. The moment he heard the news, he immediately boarded a plane back to Hong Kong and started mapping out his battle strategy. Overnight, he secured a $2.2 billion credit line from HSBC, then immediately announced publicly, "You offer 100, I'll offer 105. It happened to be the weekend, so the news sat there and settled for 2 days. By Monday morning, in less than 2 hours, Y.K. Pao had bought enough shares. He won. As Hong Kong newspapers put it at the time, CY. Cheung struck with lightning speed, fighting a brilliantly clean and decisive acquisition battle of the century. But in this battle, Boss Bao won. Yet it was a Pyrrhic victory. He won face, but lost money. When he was using 105 to buy up Wharf shares, New Bigging over there had sneakily and quietly dumped all the 10+ million Wharf shares he held onto him. Actually, Pao Yugang had clearly stated at the time, "I don't want these British holdings." To put it bluntly, he was afraid of getting played. "You drive up the price and then dump your shares on me. I pay a premium to bail you out. I don't want to be the one liberating you." But in fact, the end result was exactly that he truly did liberate New Bigging. After New Bigging exited his position, he walked away with over 700 million in profits, tears and all. So, from a conspiracy theory perspective, maybe New Bigging never really intended to push Pao Yukong out from the start. It's entirely possible he just wanted to set him up, make a quick profit off him, then walk away clean. Many people later criticized New Bigging, saying, "You didn't hold your ground, you just ran away. How can you call yourself Bijian when you're anything but steadfast?" But his response showed real breadth of vision. He said, "Open your eyes and look, the entire situation has already changed. Britain is already preparing to abandon Hong Kong, and Chinese merchants are growing bigger and stronger there. It's like when America nurtured Japan back in the day. Suddenly one day, they looked down and realized the baby they'd been cradling in their arms was actually a tiger." People always fixate on Wharf holdings, but they fail to see whether what they're dealing with is a baby or a tiger. If a person's arm is bitten by a tiger, whether that hand is trembling or struggling, it will be bitten off or injured. A smart person wouldn't waste time worrying about the hand that's already lost, but would instead focus on how to save the other hand. At the time, media headlines read, "Shipping King wins through loss. Jardine smiles while severing its arm." Was it brutal? Absolutely brutal. But how much did Pao Yugang pay for this loss? On Monday, he acquired shares at 105. Trading was suspended on Tuesday, and when it resumed on Wednesday, the price had dropped to 74.5. In just 2 days, his paper losses reached 610 million Hong Kong dollars. Plus, the interest on his borrowed 2.2 billion Hong Kong dollars loan, calculated at 13% annual interest, meant he had to pay 286 million in interest per year. It really wasn't easy. But YK Pao's foresight and vision proved itself just 2 years later. On one hand, Wharf later generated substantial profits for him. On the other hand, why was he so determined to buy the Wharf back then? The shipping magnate was abandoning ship to come ashore. He realized that the shipping industry was heading into a downturn, and he had to sell high ahead of time. So this strategy was very forward-looking. The downturn in shipping did come very quickly. Others lost badly, but he managed to dodge it ahead of time. Alright, we'll set aside Pao Yukong's story for now and turn our attention back to Li Ka-shing. He walked away completely unscathed, not a scratch on him, and even pocketed tens of millions more. But let's not dwell on that either. The most important thing is Hutchison Whampoa, which we set aside earlier. Now it's time to talk about it. What was Hutchison Whampoa's background back then? Hong Kong's second largest multinational corporation and largest listed company, whose economic strength once surpassed the steady and powerful Swire Group, threatening the position of Jardine Matheson. Among Hong Kong's 4 major trading houses, it held one position, 2 core businesses. First was Hutchison, and second was Whampoa Dock. The predecessor of Hutchison was founded in Hong Kong in 1860, initially engaged mainly in the import and export trade of Indian cotton and wool textiles produced in Britain, import and export trade of Chinese tea. In 1877, it was renamed Hutchison and Company, but its scale remained modest. Development wasn't particularly rapid, operating at a third or fourth tier level. It wasn't until after World War II ended that a pivotal figure arrived on the scene: John Zecca. This man was quite bold and visionary. Under his single-handed management, Hutchison Trading Company finally began to soar, becoming capable of standing shoulder to shoulder with the three top-tier foreign firms, Jardine Matheson, Swire, and he stood shoulder to shoulder with the three top-tier foreign firms, Wheelock, Jardine, and Swire. Cheung was extremely ambitious, determined to turn Hutchison into the second Jardine Matheson. So in the late 60s and early 70s, he orchestrated a dazzling series of mergers and acquisitions, snapping up countless enterprises. At its peak, Hutchison controlled over 360 companies, including Watson's among them. During this same buying spree, Cheung also acquired 30% of the shares in Whampoa Dockyard, making him the largest shareholder. This was the first time Hutchison and Whampoa came together. We should talk about Whampoa Dock as well. It was established in 1863 through a joint investment by several British companies that had made fortunes operating shipping businesses and opium trade in East Asia. Among these companies was Jardine Matheson. Jardine actually got its start in the opium trade as well. The Whampoa Dockyard later continuously acquired other shipping companies, monopolizing ship repair and shipbuilding operations throughout South China, including the Hong Kong region. Whampoa Dockyard had one critical advantage. It owned vast amounts of cheap land in both Kowloon and Hong Kong Island. Just how much land are we talking about? After Hutchison took control of it, it became the largest landowner in Hong Kong at one point. Cheap and abundant. When these two words came together, Li Ka-shing's ears perked right up. But at that time, he couldn't afford Hutchison Whampoa. So how did he end up buying it? We need to go back to Hutchison's side of the story first. John Riddell kept buying and buying, swallowing more than he could digest, and started to get diarrhea. At first, he could still make some money trading stocks to offset his losses. He was quite the skilled operator in the secondary market. But after '73, the Hong Kong stock market started falling apart too. The oil crisis triggered a real estate collapse, and Cheung was completely out of options. There was no way to turn things around, so he had no choice but to sell the company to stay afloat. In 1975, HSBC shelled out $150 million, acquiring 33.65% of Hutchison's shares, becoming the controlling shareholder of the Hutchison Group. Cheung was completely out of the picture. The professional manager who later replaced Cheung was named Whaley, who strongly advocated for Hutchison Trading Company to merge with Whampoa once again. In 1978, Hutchison Whampoa Limited was officially established. After Whaley took charge, he turned the company around from losses to profits. And this is where things got interesting. Why is it delicate? When HSBC initially took controlling stake in Hutchison, it was merely a stopgap measure. Because it was a bank, and under Hong Kong's company law and banking regulations, banks weren't allowed to engage in non-financial business operations. A creditor bank can take over an insolvent industrial or commercial enterprise, but once operations are back on track, it must sell it to the original owner or other enterprises. HSBC had also made a promise at the time: once Hutchison's situation improved, they would choose the right moment and the right buyer to transfer out most of the shares they held. Li Ka-shing was waiting for exactly this opportunity. Now, take a close look at this timeline. Willie took the helm in '76. By '77, the company had already turned a profit, and in '78, Hutchison and Whampoa merged. And it was precisely in '78 that Li Ka-shing turned around and passed on this grand gift of wharf, executing a masterstroke with Pow. Every step was perfectly timed, each move part of a master plan. You think it's like selling secondhand stuff on Shenyu, just casually flip wharf, buy Hutchison, and boom, done deal? No way. What's Hutchison, Whampoa's market value? A whopping 6.2 billion Hong Kong dollars. And what were Cheung Kong's total assets? Less than 700 million. He had less than 700 million, while they had over 60 billion. This was a snake swallowing an elephant, an ant swallowing an elephant. Of course, anyone familiar with capital operations knows there's room to maneuver behind the scenes. How did he seize this opportunity? HSBC gave him a huge backdoor opening. The friends we mentioned earlier, now they're coming to help. When you've taken good care of the god of wealth, it really pays off. Li Ka-shing, at 7. At HK $7.1 per share, he acquired 90 million shares of Hutchison Whampoa from HSBC, representing a 22.4% stake. Let's do the math. Hutchison Whampoa's total market value was 6.2 billion. So what was 22.4% of the shares worth? Close to 1.4 billion. How much did he actually spend? 7. HK $7.1 per share times 90 million shares, roughly 600 plus million, less than half price, a deep discount. Just handed it to him at that bargain. Not only that, HSBC also said you don't even need to pay in full, just put down a 20% deposit first. Don't have enough for the deposit? No problem, we'll lend it to you. Alright, Hutchison Whampoa is yours. Now that's one hell of a slick maneuver, practically force-feeding it into his mouth. Why would HSBC be so eager to do this? There's another detail here that doesn't make sense. The chairman of HSBC was a man named Michael Sandberg. He deliberately waited until the board members from Jardine and Swire, who were also board members at HSBC, were away, held a board meeting at HSBC, and pushed through the resolution to sell Hutchison Whampoa to Cheung Kong. If they had been there, this deal would never have gone through. At the very least, you'd need to have a competitive bidding process, right? But there was nothing, not even a bidding process. They just held a meeting as a formality and forced it onto Li Ka-shing. Completely unreasonable. And before that, he had never even consulted Hutchison's management team for their opinion. Reportedly didn't even give them a heads up. Hutchison Whampoa was sold off without even knowing it themselves. When Wardley found out, he went absolutely crazy and started cursing. He said, "Shen B, you complete idiot. You just sold such a premium British asset to the Chinese right under our noses. You're nothing but a traitor to your country. And you, Li Ka-shing, you're a barbarian at the gate. We don't welcome you." But cursing aside, the deal was already done. The explanation Michael Sandberg gave later went like this. A bank is not a charity, not a political institution, and not an Englishman's club. Don't call me a traitor. A bank is a bank. A bank's purpose is to make profit. Whoever can make money for HSBC is HSBC's good friend. The outside commentary was even more direct. HSBC anticipated that within the next decade, Li Ka-shing would certainly become the most important figure in all of Hong Kong. He would be the next Pow. The victor was naturally the first choice. Standing at that moment in time, many people might have thought this was just an excuse. But after another 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, when you look back, it's truly the case. After that, Li Ka-shing entrusted virtually all of his business operations to HSBC for quite a considerable period of time, making HSBC an absolutely close ally of Cheung Kong. Of course, from Li Ka-shing's perspective, he was also personally very grateful to Shen B. When Michael Sandberg retired in 1986, Li Ka-shing gave him a 1-meter-tall solid gold replica of the HSBC headquarters building. You can judge for yourself just how significant this gesture of gratitude was. On September 25, 1979, Li Ka-shing officially reached an agreement with HSBC regarding the acquisition of Hutchison Whampoa shares. The Far Eastern Economic Review called it a deal of the century that shot Li Ka-shing straight into the stratosphere. After this battle, Cheung leapt to become Hong Kong's second-largest real estate company, right behind Hong Kong Land. The position was now solidly secured. Before, they only had the impressive name, but now they could truly compete on equal footing. On January 1st, 1981, Li Ka-shing naturally assumed the position of chairman of the board at Hutchison Whampoa, becoming the first Chinese person to take control of a British trading house. That year, Cheung's annual profit reached 1.385 billion Hong Kong dollars, equivalent to 31.7 times its profit in the first year of listing. Think about it, just 2 years ago when he acquired Hutchison Whampoa, the total assets were only a few hundred million, less than $1 billion. Now, 2 years later, the annual profit alone reached 1.3 billion. You can see just how much profit Hutchison brought him. That same year, the Far Eastern Economic Review called Li Ka-shing Superman of Hong Kong for the first time. They put him on the cover with a cartoon image, a Superman figure charging straight at you, both fists raised in the air as if ready to throw a punch, with Li Ka-shing's head. Below it, a line of text read, Hong Kong's Superman. From then on, Superman Li became the nickname for Li Ka-shing. By the 1980s, there were approximately 4,000 real estate companies operating in Hong Kong, with around 100 of them publicly listed. Among them were the 5 Chinese property tycoons, Cheung Holdings, Sun Hung Kai Properties, New World Development, Henderson Land Development, Hang Lung Properties, and others. The 10 largest real estate companies saw their stock market value account for 70% of the total value of all listed property and construction companies. The Matthew effect was extremely pronounced. Throughout the entire 1980s, Cheung's property projects accounted for approximately 20% of Hong Kong's entire property market. One company held 20% of the market, and that included large-scale public housing projects, essentially government-subsidized rental housing and affordable housing developments. The scale was enormous, so Li Ka-shing once earned the nickname King of Public Housing. Through various spin-offs, reorganizations, and corporate restructuring, he broke everything down and rearranged it, streamlining the structure between all the companies. He streamlined all the structures, internal business divisions, and profit distribution arrangements among the companies within the group. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, the shareholding structure of the Cheung Group looked like this. Li Ka-shing held 33.4%. Cheung Holdings controlled 36.55% of Hutchison Whampoa and 42.9% of Green Island Cement. Hutchison Whampoa in turn controlled 53.8%. And Cavendish International in turn controlled 23.5% of Hong Kong Electric Group. Layer upon layer of holdings. Through this structure, Li Ka-shing used 9.8 billion of his private capital to control a business empire worth over 90 billion. What does over 90 billion mean? That had already surpassed the entire Jardine Matheson conglomerate. We're talking close to 100 billion here. At that time in Hong Kong, to operate at this level meant the steel pipe wasn't just standing upright anymore. It was practically piercing the sky. By the end of June 1990, Cheung Holdings' market value had climbed to 28.128 billion Hong Kong dollars. By this time, he had already become the #1 listed property company in Hong Kong. What about Jardine Land? 216 billion. ranked 3rd. It's easier to shake a mountain than to shake Hong Kong land. Well, sorry, we just shook it. Next up, it's time to expand beyond Hong Kong. Step out onto the world stage and plant those steel pipes across the globe. After shaking up Hong Kong land, the next question was, what now? Most people, having reached this point, would probably choose to play it safe and defend what they'd built. After all, controlling a 900 billion empire with just 9.8 billion just holding on to that would be more than enough to keep anyone busy. But Li Ka-shing wasn't just anyone. The phrase enough simply doesn't exist in his vocabulary. Throughout the entire 1980s, the subsidiaries and sub-subsidiaries controlled by the Cheung Group had already exceeded 100 companies. His business operations extended beyond real estate to include telecommunications, energy, container shipping, port terminals, retail, and more. But Li Ka-shing saw it very clearly. You can't put all your eggs in one basket, especially when that basket is called Hong Kong. What is Hong Kong? A tiny speck of land. The market is only so big, the ceiling is only so low. No matter how brilliantly you flip and turn inside it, you're still just thrashing about in a well. What he wanted was the ocean. In late 1986, Li Ka-shing made a decision that everyone thought was crazy. He threw down a whopping 3.2 billion Hong Kong dollars to take control of Canada's Husky Energy. This was the largest Hong Kong investment flowing into Canada at that time. What did Husky do? Oil and natural gas. This stuff was a completely different world from building houses. A guy who deals with cement and bricks suddenly jumping into oil? Plenty of people were waiting to see him fail. But Li Ka-shing had his own calculations. In the mid-1980s, international oil prices plummeted. Canadian energy companies were generally struggling, and Husky's valuation was pushed down very low. Li Ka-shing made the judgment that oil is a non-renewable resource, and in the long run, prices would definitely rise. Buy in at the bottom, wait for the cycle to turn, and make a fortune. Exactly the same logic as when he bought Wharf and Hutchison Whampoa back in the day. It's just that this time, the target changed from Hong Kong real estate to Canadian frozen tundra. Li Ka-shing later said this was one of the greatest investments of his life. Facts proved he bet right again. Husky's value later multiplied several times over, and the dividends alone paid back the principal countless times. The success of this acquisition hinged on two indispensable factors. The first factor was an old friend, the bank. The Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce helped broker this deal, and at the time, Li Ka-shing held a 9% stake in the bank. You see, this banking route strategy of his truly worked like a charm every single time. From HSBC to the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, behind every critical acquisition, there was a bank opening doors for him. The second factor was a fierce general under his command, Canning Fok. Speaking of this, we must pull this character out and talk about him separately. Canning Fok was the managing director of Hutchison Whampoa. In Li Ka-shing's office, there were 6 landline phones, and one of them was dedicated exclusively to him. Just think about the treatment: 6 phone lines, one for Canning Fok, and the remaining 5 shared among hundreds of companies throughout the entire Cheung Group. This man had a nickname, someone with money-making cells coursing through his entire body. Why was he called that? Because he possessed an extremely rare ability: off-balance sheet financing. What is off-balance sheet financing? Simply put, it's using a small amount to leverage a large return. When ordinary people overdo leverage, it becomes gambling, and they most likely end up bankrupt. But Canning Fok was different. He could maintain an extremely high expansion rate while keeping the company's debt-to-asset ratio under control. In plain terms, it's like making the horse run fast while also making sure it doesn't stumble. The investment arrangements, stock issuances, bank loans, bond conversions of the Cheung Group, nearly every major merger and acquisition deal, all had Canning Fok's fingerprints on them. He was the sharpest scalpel in Li Ka-shing's hand. Every cut he made landed precisely on the most valuable spot. During the Husky acquisition, there was a particularly interesting detail. At the time, Canning Fok was about to get married, but he always put work first. During the tug-of-war negotiations with the Canadian side, once they started talking, it would go on for over 11 hours inside a sealed conference room. Multiple parties went back and forth, haggling over every detail, revising clauses again and again, scrutinizing numbers over and over. After 11 hours, the deal was finally done. Canning Fok glanced at his watch, gathered up his documents, and rushed straight to the airport without looking back to catch the last flight to Hong Kong for his wedding. If that negotiation had dragged on for just another half hour, the groom wouldn't have made it to his own wedding. Some people thought this was a workaholic, neglecting his family, but what Li Ka-shing saw was something else entirely. This person would do whatever it took to get things done. How far he could push himself to get things done. You could pay someone like this any amount, and it wouldn't be a loss. But Canning Fok's true claim to fame wasn't Husky Energy. It was another even crazier deal, Orange. It was another even crazier deal, Orange. In 1991, Hutchison Whampoa spent 8.4 billion Hong Kong dollars to acquire a British telecom company called Rabbit, preparing to enter the 2G mobile communications business. What kind of outfit was Rabbit? A half-dead company. Sparse users. Outdated technology. It couldn't even crack the rankings in the British telecom market. When Canning Fok took over, the company was practically on life support. Most people, seeing this mess, would have turned around and run the other way. But Canning Fok was different. He did one thing. He repackaged Rabbit and gave it a new name, Orange. Whether the name was good or not is another matter, but what happened next can only be described as a miracle. In just 5 years, Canning Fok took Orange from 3 million users to 35 million, forcefully building it into Europe's third-largest telecom operator. From 3 million to 35 million users in 5 years, more than tenfold growth. In a market already carved up completely by giants, they forcibly tore open a gap. After Orange went public in London, it became the absolute star of the FTSE 100 index. The stock price shot up like it was on steroids. But here's the problem. There were still two giants standing in the way, Britain's Vodafone and Germany's Mannesmann. What kind of players were these two? Think of them as Europe's China Mobile and China Unicom. No matter how hard Orange fought, it was still just number 3. Even worse, Vodafone and Mannesmann were already locked in a brutal, bloody battle for the number 1 spot at the time. When two giants fight, who's most likely to get trampled? The one caught in the middle, number 3. Li Ka-shing took one look at the situation and made a textbook-level decision. He didn't choose to tough it out, nor did he choose to keep expanding. He chose to sell. And he didn't sell it quietly. He proactively leaked the news, letting the whole world know. Orange, I want to sell. What do you call this move? It's called holding out for the highest bidder. Think about it. Vodafone and Mannesmann were fighting to be number 1. If either side could snap up Orange, the number 3 player, first they'd leave their rival in the dust. Everyone wanted to buy it, but each side feared the other would buy it first. As soon as the two sides started bidding against each other, Orange's value immediately skyrocketed. In the end, Canning Fok pulled off some fierce maneuvers and sold Orange to Germany's Mannesmann. When you add it all up, this single deal earned Hutchison Whampoa over 100 billion Hong Kong dollars in profit. What does 100 billion Hong Kong dollars mean? Some say this was the single most profitable transaction in Hong Kong's history since its founding. In over 100 years, No one had ever made this much money from a single deal. And it doesn't end there. Now comes the most exciting part of the story. On this side, just a few months after Hutchison completed the deal with Mannesmann, Vodafone over there straight up flipped the table. Flipped what table? Vodafone pulled out $200 billion. Note, that's US dollars, and directly merged with Mannesmann. This became one of the largest acquisitions in human commercial history. And when Hutchison sold Orange, they received in exchange a portion of Mannesmann's shares from Mannesmann's side. When Vodafone merged with Mannesmann, these stocks surged again. The over 10 million Mannesmann shares held by Hutchison appreciated by more than 50 billion Hong Kong dollars. Think about this operation. First, they nurtured Orange, grew it to a level that made the giants salivate, then sold it off at the peak. After selling, it wasn't over yet, because the shares they got back were caught up in an even bigger merger, surging again. In today's terms, this is called a double kill. Winning once wasn't enough, he had to win again. After this battle, Canning Fok firmly established his position in Li Ka-shing's eyes. Later, when someone asked about his annual salary, the figure that came out shocked everyone in 2019. Canning Fok's annual salary reached its peak at 2.26 billion Hong Kong dollars. Do the math, that's over 620,000 a day. What you earn in one day of work is enough for an ordinary person to labor for several years. Hong Kong media gave him a title, the Working Emperor. Of course, those words working need to be in quotation marks. Someone who could reach this level under Li Ka-shing wasn't just an employee in the ordinary sense anymore. How did Li Ka-shing evaluate him? He once said, "You shouldn't aim to be a boss, but rather to be a leader. A leader guides people and inspires them to willingly give their best effort. A boss only knows how to control people, making others feel insignificant." This statement appears to be about management philosophy on the surface, but it's actually describing his relationship with Canning Fok. "I don't treat you as an employee. I treat you as a partner. You help me make money, I make you the highest paid employee in all of Hong Kong. That's what you call vision." In 1999, Li Ka-shing topped Forbes' list as Asia's richest person. And once he claimed that throne, he held on to it for 16 years. Just how wealthy was he? Let me break down the numbers for you. 1/7 of all commercial residential properties in Hong Kong belonged to him, half of the port terminal container business was his, and 70% of the supermarket retail market share was his. Take a look at Hong Kong's streets and alleys. Fortress, the electronics retailer, is his. Watson's is his. Hutchison, Telecom, is his. And 70% of the supermarkets, which supermarket chain is that? Park and Shop Supermarkets, also his. Cheung's business penetrated every corner of Hong Kong, encompassing the entire life cycle of Hong Kong people from birth to death. You're born in his buildings, buy baby formula at his supermarkets, use his telephone services to contact people, shop, and spend at his malls. And after you die, you might still need to use his funeral services. So much so that some people directly call Hong Kong Li's City. This nickname, if you think about it carefully, is not a compliment. Back then, there was an article that circulated widely, supposedly an essay written by an elementary school student in Hong Kong. Listen to what this kid said. "Li Ka-shing, he is our God. All things were created by him." Of course, Hong Kong's legendary Holy Trinity is them: Li Ka-shing, Victor Li, and Richard Li. Their power far exceeds that of ordinary humans, sheltering the working class from wind and rain, protecting Hong Kong from typhoons and storms. They've given so much, simply hoping that we can clock in on time and not leave on time. This is all part of Brother Shing's greatness. This kind of veiled criticism isn't saying anything good at all. What even an elementary school kid can see through, adults understand even more clearly. In 2013, a serious strike broke out at Hutchison Whampoa's Hong Kong international terminals. The striking dockworkers spoke out, saying, "Over the past decade or so, our wages have only decreased, never increased. Our working conditions are extremely harsh, with very high risks to personal safety, and the contract terms are unreasonable." The leader was even more blunt. "Li Ka-shing never thinks about us. He only wants to make money." A banner was hung in front of Cheung Holdings headquarters in Central, with 4 large characters written on it. "Young Hei Lei Young, Bot Hei Ga." Young Hei Lei is the Cantonese homophone for supporting you. It means, I can afford to support you, the boss, but I can't afford to support my own family. This strike lasted a full 40 days, making it the longest strike in Hong Kong since World War II. Times had changed. Once upon a time, this group of Chinese conglomerates, represented by Cheung Holdings, Sun Hung Kai, and Henderson Land, defeated the British conglomerates, allowing the Chinese people to hold their heads high with pride. People cheered for them and rallied behind them, treating them as totems of the Lion Rock spirit. But decades later, yesterday's heroes have become targets of public criticism. The very people who cheered for him back then started cursing him now, and the bigger storm was yet to come. In 2015, Lookout Think Tank, an institution under Xinhua News Agency, published an article with the headline, "Don't Let Li Ka-shing Get Away." What was it about? Li Ka-shing sold off a property development in Shanghai under Cheung Holdings at a discounted price of 20 billion yuan. To many people, this seemed like a prelude to his plan to withdraw from China and transfer his wealth to Europe. The article's tone was accusatory, saying he was biting the hand that fed him and abandoning moral principles. "You made your money in China, and now you want to run?" Once this article came out, public opinion exploded. In reality, Li Ka-shing's transfer of assets overseas didn't just begin in 2015. As early as December 2012, Cheung Holdings never acquired another piece of land in mainland China. From that point on, he began selling off various assets, including those in mainland China as well as Hong Kong. In 2014 alone, he offloaded at least 80 billion yuan worth of mainland assets. There's a saying that over the past decade he cashed out 200 billion from China, then aggressively invested in the UK, pouring in 400 billion. What did those 400 billion buy? About a quarter of Britain's electricity supply, 30% of its natural gas supply, 7% of the water market, and 40% of the telecommunications market, plus over 30% of Britain's ports, and more than 500,000 square meters of land resources. Many people say he bought half of Britain. Some people say he's abandoning ship for land, just like Pao Yue-kong did back in the day. But here's the difference. What Pao Yue-kong abandoned back then was the shipping industry, and what he jumped to was real estate. He switched industries. What Li Ka-shing jumped was countries. The nature is completely different. You made money in China for decades, then turned around and invested in Britain? That rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. There's a statement circulating online that's supposedly Li Ka-shing's response. "I'm merely a businessman. Please don't measure me with empty morals. Don't try to make businessmen shoulder the political responsibilities of the state. And don't try to use politics to influence a businessman's operating philosophy. Render unto God what is God's, unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Business belongs to business. Politics belongs to politics." Sounds pretty reasonable, doesn't it? A lot of people read this and thought, well, now that's the kind of vision a great businessman should have. But here's the problem. This passage is fake. It wasn't said by Li Ka-shing. Someone online made it up pretending to be him. The Li Ka-shing Foundation's official website even posted a statement debunking it. It's just that debunking rumors never spreads as widely as the rumors themselves. That's often how things work in this world. So, what did Li Ka-shing actually say? He did say something, which was during a public interview. If I didn't have the ambition to grow big and strong, I wouldn't have reached where I am today. He also said, what I'm most proud of isn't defeating Hong Kong land, but rather that I have many partners who still maintain relationships with me after our collaborations. Think about these two statements. One speaks to ambition, the other speaks to character. Ambition gets you to the top. Character ensures you're not alone when you get there. But in this era, for a business person, which matters more, ambition or character? Or, to put it more sharply, who should a businessman actually be accountable to? To shareholders? To employees? To the country? Or only to their own wallet? This question has no standard answer, but behind every choice lies a completely different path. Now let's talk about the man himself after discussing the business. In 2005, a reporter asked Li Ka-shing, over these past decades, you've been the business leader of the Chinese people. How do you evaluate your life? Li Ka-shing's response was this: speaking as a citizen, if a nation has outstanding citizens, that nation must be built on integrity. This, I can say with certainty. As an entrepreneur, running a business with this principle, one can also have a clear conscience. As a friend, throughout my entire life, I have never betrayed trust or broken faith. Never. I can only do things this way. It's just the norm. It's just that in the development of your career, you don't have enough time for your family, not enough time for your son. Did you notice that? The first few sentences, integrity, a clear conscience, never betraying trust, or abandoning righteousness, all speak to grand, lofty things: the nation, one's career, one's friends. But in that last line, his tone suddenly softened. Not enough time for family, not enough time for my son. A man standing at the pinnacle of world wealth. When he said those words, you could hear the regret. Li Ka-shing has two sons. The eldest is Li Ka-shing. The second is Richard Li. As everyone knows, Li Ka-shing is famous for raising his sons through austere upbringing. What does austere upbringing mean? Word has it that these two brothers rarely had the chance to enjoy a luxurious lifestyle when they were young. They seldom rode in private cars when going out, instead squeezing onto public buses with their father. Rode electric bikes. They rarely got pocket money and were encouraged to work part-time jobs to earn their own spending money. The two kids often wondered, does Dad really have money? Are you just pretending to be rich? That's an old Hong Kong saying. A bat sticks a few chicken feathers on itself, pretending to be a bird. Li Ka-shing's perspective was, in order to let them experience the hardships of life from a young age, to understand that nothing comes easy, and to prevent them from becoming spoiled rich kids. But he wasn't making them suffer just for the sake of suffering. These two brothers were arranged to sit in on company board meetings as observers when they were only 8 or 9 years old. At 8 or 9 years old, when other kids were still watching cartoons, they were already sitting in a room full of adults in suits and ties, listening to them discuss deals worth hundreds of millions. Li Ka-shing said, I bring them to company meetings not to teach them how to do business, but to let them know that doing business isn't a simple matter. It takes tremendous effort. It takes many meetings to make things happen. Think about this educational philosophy. It's not about teaching you how to make money, but first, letting you understand how difficult it is to earn money. First, shatter the illusions, then give you real combat experience. The two sons had completely different personalities. The eldest, Victor Li, was steady and reserved, more like his father. Graduated from Stanford University with a degree in civil engineering, joined Cheung in 1985, started from the ground up, and worked his way all the way to Li Ka-shing's position. This person rarely appears in public, speaks very little, and operates with extreme caution. In today's terms, he's the type who quietly gets the job done without making any noise. The second son, Richard Li, was completely different. He had personality, had a temper, with a rebellious streak in his bones. He dropped out of college before finishing, worked for 3 years at a company in Canada, and then came back to Cheung to work. But he wasn't happy about it. He complained to his father, "You're paying me way too little, not even a tenth of what I made in Canada. I'm earning less than the company janitors." Li Ka-shing said, "Wrong. You're not the lowest paid in the entire group. I am." Richard Li said, "Dad, you're just symbolically taking that small amount. I'm genuinely making only this much. The nature is completely different." Bottom line, working for someone else, he didn't want to do that anymore. The next year, he borrowed a little money from his father, $110 million, and went out to start his own business. Calling it borrowed a little money, we're talking about $110 million. Only a family like this could call over $100 million a little money. With this startup capital, he partnered with Hutchison Whampoa to establish Hong Kong's first satellite television station, which would later become the renowned Star TV. 2 years later, he sold 64% of the shares to Murdoch, making a clean profit of $400 million. Another 2 years passed, and he sold off all the remaining shares to Murdoch, earning 6 times his investment. 6 times his investment. Seeing how thrilling this was, way better than working for someone else, he completely struck out on his own from that point on and stopped getting involved in the family business altogether. Some say his relationship with his father was strained, and the reason had to do with his mother's death. On January 1st, 1990, Li Ka-shing's wife, Cheung Ming, passed away at the age of 58. The official announcement was sudden heart attack, but various rumors have circulated over the years. Richard Li once said in an interview that when his mother was alive, she suffered from chronic insomnia, and his father was so busy with work that he rarely had time to keep her company. Over time, his mother became increasingly melancholic and unhappy. Some have even written that the hero in Richard Li's heart was Lee Kuan Yew, not his father, Li Ka-shing. Whether this is true or not, you can sense one thing in this family. There are cracks in the bonds of affection, and the root of that rift lies in those words, "Not enough time for family." You spent 40 years building a business empire, but in those same 40 years, you neglected the people closest to you. What was the cost? Your wife lives in unhappiness, and your younger son's hero isn't you. This accounting is harder to calculate than any business deal. But no matter how you look at it, both sons turned out incredibly capable. That's undeniable. The eldest took over the business steady as a rock, while the younger one struck out on his own and made it big. Li Ka-shing truly had his exceptional qualities when it came to grooming successors. In 2012, Li Ka-shing publicly announced his estate division plan. All assets of the Cheung holding system would be handed over to his eldest son, Victor Li. And what about the second son? Li Ka-shing said, "I'll give him cash in multiples of what you know his current business assets to be worth." Someone asked the eldest son, Li Ka-shing, "Do you feel your father is playing favorites?" Li Ka-shing answered for him, "If he's not satisfied, he can switch with Li Ka-shing." The implication being, do you think taking the company is better or taking a large sum of cash? These two options are actually equivalent. Neither one gets the advantage, neither one gets shortchanged. This bowl of water was held perfectly level. In March 2018, Li Ka-shing, nearly 90 years old, officially stepped down as chairman of the board of CK Hutchison Holdings, with his eldest son, Victor Li, taking over. The announcement stated that Li Ka-shing would take on the role of senior advisor for CK Hutchison going forward, continuing to contribute to the group and provide counsel on major matters. Not a complete handoff, but he's already passed the baton. This poor boy from a small Chaoshan town lost his father at 12, started out making plastic flowers, and fought his way to become Asia's richest man, holding that position for a full 16 years. What was the secret to his success? He once summarized it himself: hard work, frugality, perseverance, eagerness to learn, and building good relationships with people. He also said, before the age of 20, 100% of career success comes from hard work with your own two hands. Between 20 and 30, 10% depends on luck, and 90% still comes from hard work. After that, the proportion of opportunity gradually increases until eventually luck accounts for about 30 to 40%. Do you believe that? I don't know. I only know that there is no one-size-fits-all formula for success in this world. Every person's success is the result of their character, their era, their choices, and a whole bunch of inexplicable luck all stacked together. Just as his eldest son, Victor Li, once said, "My principle is to always keep my feet firmly on the ground." I believe no one should ever consider themselves to have already succeeded. We must examine our achievements every day and reflect on how we can do better. The 16th of March, 2018, Hong Kong. In his office on the 70th floor of Cheung Center, Li Ka-shing sat in that chair for the last time as chairman of the board. Outside the window was Victoria Harbor, a skyline he had built brick by brick over 70 years. The handover ceremony was brief. No tears, no embrace, not even any small talk. He handed the seal to his eldest son, Li Ka-shing, gave a slight nod, and then stood up to leave. The 90-year-old man walked very slowly, but no one knew what was going through his mind. Was he remembering that ragged teenager from 1940, or calculating the latest valuation of those London assets? Feeling relieved about the curtain falling on the Superman title, or feeling wronged by those 5 words, "Don't let him get away"? We don't know. The only thing we know for certain is shortly after he appeared in London, 9,600 kilometers. 78 years earlier, he had measured the distance from Chaozhou to Hong Kong with his own 2 feet. Back then, he was 12 years old. His father had just died of illness, and his mother was fleeing with him and his younger siblings. All he had was the single layer of clothing on his back and not a penny in his pockets. 78 years later, he measured the distance from Hong Kong to London in his private jet. At that time, he was 90 years old, Asia's richest man, who had held the top spot on the Forbes list for 16 consecutive years. Behind him lay assets worth 400 billion and an overwhelming torrent of criticism. 2 migrations, 2 kinds of escape, but in essence, they were the same thing: survival. In 1940, he had to stay alive. In 2018, he wanted everything he had built to survive. The only difference was, the first time, what hunted him was war and hunger. The second time, what hunted him was some kind of premonition he himself couldn't quite articulate. Some called him a prophet, others called him a coward. Some say he betrayed Hong Kong, others say Hong Kong betrayed him first. Some call him ungrateful. Others say this era never had any gratitude to speak of in the first place. But all these judgments he probably doesn't care about anymore, because he understands one thing better than anyone else in this world: nothing lasts forever. Not the Lion Rock spirit, not the rise of Chinese capital, not the title of Asia's richest man, not even the moniker of the Li family's city. He'd witnessed too many rises and falls. He'd watched Jardine Matheson go from invincible arrogance to graceful retreat. Watched YK transform from shipping king to abandoning ships for land. Watched Hong Kong shift from colony to reunification. He'd witnessed countless people rise to great heights before him, only to plummet in an instant. The one thing he learned was to always leave the table one step ahead of everyone else. Before the 1973 stock market crash, he got out. Before the 1997 financial crisis, he pulled back. After 2012, he began that long, systematic retreat. Every time, when others were still clinking glasses and making merry, he was already calculating his exit strategy. Was this shrewdness or cold-bloodedness? Foresight or betrayal? Perhaps the question itself is wrong from the start. Because for someone who's been fleeing since the age of 12, leaving has never been a moral question. It's an instinct, a survival instinct etched into his bones, more ancient than any business intuition. He once said, "I'm merely a businessman." That statement is both true and false. True, in that he truly never saw himself as some hero, some totem, some embodiment of the spirit of an age. Those labels were put on him by others, not something he wanted for himself. The false part is someone who is merely a businessman, wouldn't break down, sobbing at his wife's funeral, wouldn't stand alone at the window for half an hour staring at Victoria Harbor on the day of his retirement. He wouldn't, at the age of 90, still remember that night of hunger and cold from 78 years ago. He wasn't merely a businessman. He was a man who lived through an entire century, witnessed far too many rises and falls, and ultimately chose to stand in a place where the tides could not reach. Whether this choice was right or wrong, history will provide the answer. But before the answer is revealed, let me ask you one final question. If you were him, losing your father at 12, starting a business at 22, reaching the peak at 50, at 70, being cursed as someone who bites the hand that feeds you, and at 90, tearing everything up by the roots, what would you choose? 9,600 kilometers. This isn't a businessman's retreat route. This is the safe distance a man measured out over his entire lifetime. From Chaozhou to Hong Kong, from Hong Kong to London, from refugee to the richest man, from Superman to sinner. This journey took him 90 years, and all of us were just standing by the roadside, watching his figure fade into the distance, trying to make sense of his choices. But perhaps what really needs to be understood isn't him. It's ourselves. It's why we once needed a Superman so desperately, and why we were so eager to pull him down from his pedestal. It's what exactly we placed our hopes in through him, and what we lost when he left. The answer to this question isn't in Hong Kong, isn't in London, isn't on any balance sheet. It lives in the heart of each and every one of us. I'm Fanko. Thank you for staying with me through these 2 episodes. These 2 videos took an enormous amount of effort to create. If you enjoyed them, don't forget to give a like, comment, and share. See you in the next episode.